Last time we left Mexico, it was in an ideological struggle between the conservatives, which favored a very centralized administration that retained many aspects of the former colony, with most favoring a reinstatement of the European-style monarchy, and the liberals, which favored curbing the power of the church and the military, and most wanting an establishment of a more USA-style republic. And this ideological divide wouldn't really go away for the next century or more. Since Iturbide death, Mexico is highly unstable, going from being an empire to an ill-conceived republic, to then being attacked by Spain trying to reconquer it, to then another ill-conceived republic, to then losing a war with Texas and the USA, while switching to a third ill-conceived republic, all while this guy, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, a military leader, president, dictator, kind of controlled things to various degrees during this period. Oh, and while all of this was happening, a bunch of conservative and liberal rebellions occurred as well, helping to increase the natural chaos of the era. All this combined and more that we don't have time to talk about meant that Mexico was in a deep state of poop. And it is this state of affairs in the year of 1854 that we start our journey. As I have mentioned before, since the First Mexican Empire, the Mexican politics were largely dictated by one person, Santa Anna. He is a complicated character to say the least. He was a prominent military leader, a president, and a dictator, sometimes all at once, sometimes one at a time, sometimes he called politics boring and left on a military campaign while leaving someone else in charge. Sometimes he left completely only to later come back. It was a game of hats to him. Nonetheless, even though it can't be said he completely controlled Mexico during the entire time since the dissolution of the empire, he was so prominent in Mexican politics during this time that many historians just call it the Age of Santa Anna, as all major events in Mexican history during this era involved him in one way or another. He wasn't really liked by the conservatives or the liberals, as his reforms were very staunchly centralist, not giving either side what they wanted. He mainly managed to stay in power because of public support, political maneuvering between the two factions, and the backing from the military. But in 1854 he was finally overthrown by the liberals, who quickly started implementing their laws known as La Reforma, culminating in the 1857 new constitution, which, by the way, if you're keeping count, is the fourth ill-conceived republic. Nonetheless, the conservatives weren't happy, to say the least, and with this new 1857 liberal constitution, something had to be done. So they launched a coup d'etat, taking control of Mexico City and rolling back the liberal reforms. The liberals retreated to Veracruz and called the conservative government illegitimate, and so the rest of Mexico had to choose whether to support the liberal government in Veracruz or the conservative government in Mexico City. And with that, the civil war known as the Reform War started. Initially, the conservative forces had an upper hand, already controlling some of the liberal states and having a much better equipped and trained army. However, USA decided it would be better for them if Mexico was controlled by the republic-leaning liberals rather than the monarchy-leaning conservatives. And so they started to support the liberals, who in the end, thanks in part to this support, managed to win in 1860, appointing Benito Juárez as the new Mexican president in 1861. But at this point, as you would imagine, Mexico was devastated. Its infrastructure in ruins, immensely in debt, the economy barely holding together, and conservative guerrillas still patrolling the countryside trying to fight the liberal government wherever they can. Benito Juárez had no choice but to default on the Mexican debt, which was mainly owned by the British, French, and the Spanish. Obviously, these three countries weren't happy with this and so decided to invade Mexico to force the liberal government to pay its debt. But not all of these countries had the same plan. Napoleon III, King of France, was hoping to install a French-favoring monarchy in Mexico as to have an ally in the New World. And when Mexico defaulted on its debt, it gave Napoleon the perfect casus belli to make this happen. Plus, USA was in the middle of a civil war, meaning they couldn't interfere with Napoleon's plan. When the English and Spanish found out about the ulterior plans of the French, they promptly withdrew their forces as they didn't want to support the French coup. Now alone, the French army was defeated on May the 5th at the Battle of Puebla by Ignacio Zaragoza. This Mexican victory is celebrated today as Cinco de Mayo, which, if you ask me, is kind of a random battle to have a whole holiday around. Yes, the Mexicans won against a much better trained and equipped French army, all while being outnumbered 2-1, but in the grand scheme of things, the battle didn't really change much. The French army just retreated, waited for reinforcements, and then defeated the Mexican army anyways. Yes, there are some interesting aspects of the battle applied to it retroactively, but during that time it was just another battle of many in Mexican history. But I digress. Napoleon now controlled Mexico, well, kind of. The liberal government of Benito Juarez relocated to Chihuahua with the country's treasury, hoping to continue the fight against the French, which they did, but very unsuccessfully. Napoleon also gained support from the Mexican conservatives, whom ever since their loss in the Reform War wanted to get their power back. So with Mexico now largely in the French hands, and with the help of the conservatives, the Second Mexican Empire was declared. Not long after that, a suitable European monarch to take the new throne was searched for. Kind of having a deja vu here. A suitable monarch was quickly found, Austrian-born Ferdinand Maximilian Joseph, from the House of Habsburg-Lorraine, the younger brother of Franz Joseph. Yes, that Franz Joseph. But unlike his brother, Maximilian was a true Renaissance man, believing in the many ideas that came from the Enlightenment. By age 17, he was taking 55 different classes ranging from fencing to history and engineering. He also spoke 7 to 8 languages, including Spanish. In everything Maximilian ever did, he was trying to surpass his older brother, to show everyone that even though not in line for the throne, he would be a better ruler than Franz Joseph. In the end, he was largely ignored and held several royal positions within the Austrian kingdom before being asked by Napoleon III if he wanted the Mexican throne. Maximilian didn't want to take the crown at first, saying he will only take it if the Mexican people vote in favor of him. Napoleon, along with the Mexican conservatives, obliged and staged a dubious vote which unsurprisingly turned out overwhelmingly in the favor of Maximilian. Unbeknownst to the fabricated vote, Maximilian promptly left for Mexico with his wife Charlotte of Belgium, hoping to once and for all prove to everyone that he will be a great monarch. Maximilian arrived to Mexico to a very cold welcome. There wasn't even anyone in Veracruz to meet him, he just kind of stepped off the boat and waited. Turns out the conservative attaché that was supposed to meet Maximilian in Veracruz confused the time of his arrival and so came much later. Nonetheless, Maximilian was taken to Mexico City where he chose Chapultepec Castle as his seat of power. But this is where the entire situation started to become much more clearer to Maximilian. First, he found out that he wasn't actually elected by the Mexican people and many of them didn't want him here. Second, he realized he was only in power because of the French military in Mexico that was keeping him in power. Without it, the liberal government of Juarez would come back. Third, turns out that Mexico was financially in a disaster. This combined with the fact that a large portion of the treasury was taken by the liberals and that it wasn't him but the French government who controlled the Mexican finance ministry meant that even though Maximilian was the emperor, he did not have control over the country's coffers or the military keeping him in power. But that didn't dissuade the young emperor, who had something to prove. He quickly got to work reforming the Mexican Empire according to the ideas of the Enlightenment, which, by the way, were very similar to the ideas that the liberals implemented at the start of the Reform War just a couple of years back. Maximilian abolished the large haciendas monopolies in Mexico, restricted working hours, banned child labor, cancelled all peasants' debt under 10 pesos, and banned all the selling and reselling of independent Mexican peasants known as peons, who up until now were more like slaves. He enacted many more other liberal reforms, but we don't have time to talk about all of them. Naturally, all these liberal reforms started to anger the conservatives who brought Maximilian here to get rid of the liberal reforms, not to pass them. However, Maximilian's wife, known in Mexico as Carlota, threw lavish Austrian-style galas and parties to keep the aristocrats at least somewhat occupied. Plus, in the conservative minds, having a liberal monarch is still better than a liberal government. Maximilian also brought many Austrian engineers to help build up the Mexican infrastructure and mainly rebuild Mexico City in the style of the European capital cities. For example, today's famous Paseo de la Reforma was built by Maximilian. Suddenly, the tide started to change. Many liberals, seeing Maximilian's reforms, started to take up administrative jobs within Maximilian's government, thinking maybe having this emperor isn't that bad. The peasants also started to turn to Maximilian's side, mainly the indios class, who saw having an emperor a much better option than being controlled by a majority mestizo/criollo liberal government. And overall, even the people who didn't want a monarchy started to become much less vocal about it, as everyone was sick of fighting at this point, and if peace meant having an Austrian monarch, so be it. Maximilian even tried to endear himself to the Mexican people by walking around the capital with no guards or entourage, wearing a sombrero and a Mexican charro, just chatting with the people and seeing how the day was going. He even offered Juarez a pardon and a prime ministerial position in his new government. Juarez, however, declined. He didn't fight Santa Anna and the Reform War just to now work under a foreign monarch. And that is where the troubles for Maximilian start piling on. The liberals were almost stomped out by the French army, but then the US Civil War ended. USA, now no longer preoccupied, decided it was time to intervene. The reasons for the intervention were mainly that the US didn't support the liberals in the Reform Wars just to see them now lose power, and also because all of this was a European intervention in the Americas, which under the US Monroe Doctrine was a no-go. Which seems kind of hypocritical, but I digress. President Andrew Johnson couldn't get the Congress to agree on an intervention plan, so he just relocated a lot of US Army to the Mexican border and then just had them lose their weapons and supply somewhere in that area. The Mexican liberals, now with the US support, could finally go on the offensive and started to win a bunch of battles and retake some land. Maximilian was now forced to enact the Black Decree, which made anyone forming any armed bands to be imprisoned and executed within 24 hours. This did slow down the liberals, but also angered many other people who were appalled by all the killing, sometimes even of innocent people who happened to have guns on them. So many people started to support the liberals again. While this was happening, USA exerted a lot of diplomatic pressure on France, urging them to leave at once. This, combined with a looming Franco-Prussian War back in Europe, meant that Napoleon had no choice but to withdraw all of his troops from Mexico. Without the French army, the Mexican Empire would surely fall, and Napoleon urged Maximilian to leave the country. But Maximilian, ever the naive emperor, was convinced by his conservative advisors that a solid defense can be mustered up against the liberals even without the French. However, unbeknownst to Maximilian, the conservatives didn't have much power anymore ever since their defeat in the Reform War, and this proposed defense was just a pipe dream. As a last-ditch effort, Maximilian himself went on to lead his troops into battle, and when it became obvious that the liberals will win, he allegedly hoped for a lucky bullet that would kill him in battle fighting for his country. But it never came, and eventually he was captured and sentenced to death. A day before the execution, Maximilian was offered a chance to escape, but he refused as his Mexican generals who were ordered to be executed with him couldn't make it, and he wouldn't leave them behind. Also, escaping would mean shaving his beard, which along with the escape itself would taint his proud Habsburg heritage if caught. Then so he will stay and face the firing squad as an emperor. His last words before a firing squad were in flawless Spanish. "I forgive everyone, and I ask everyone to forgive me. May my blood, which is about to be shed, be for the good of the country. Viva Mexico! Viva la Independencia!" Maximilian wasn't a perfect monarch. He was naive, easily swayed by other people, and even though goal-oriented, he was very indecisive on how to get to those goals. But with his liberal ideas and openness to hear out his advisors, with his care for all people regardless of class, and his passion to improve the living standards for all Mexicans, he was in a way the perfect monarch for Mexico. And ironically, while pursuing their goal to stabilize the country, the liberals may have squandered the best chance for peace and stability Mexico had in a long time. Or maybe not, maybe US would invade or France would fully take over, who knows. However, I will end with this statement. After the reinstatement of the Republican government, Juarez thought about releasing a list of all the liberals that asked for or gotten a job within the Maximilian administration, to which Sebastián Lerdo, a prominent liberal himself, replied, "If you publish that list, there will no longer be a liberal party." That is where this video ends. Please do read the description for so much more information that I was unable to cram into this already pretty long video. Information like the fact that there are several contradicting sources on what the actual last words of Maximilian were. So if you want to know what Maximilian may have said, check out the description. Also, please, if you can, do support me on Patreon. The editing and research for my videos takes a very long time, and this combined with the fact that oftentimes I have to cancel the sponsor spots for my videos, including this one, because the way they want to implement them would ruin the entire flow of the videos, means that I have yet to make a single dollar of profit on my channel. Therefore, any support is appreciated. As always, my name is Emilizer, and stick around for history.